Okay, we are almost ready to start because, as you know, today we have also the external public on YouTube. Okay, so welcome back to my students after 3 weeks. Today, as you know, we have the opportunity to discuss about the Kurdish question and the democratic modernity as a post-development paradigm. This is a seminar organized in the framework of our course about alternatives to development. Sorry, technical.
Prova.
I can go. Yeah? Okay, sorry.
Prova. Ok, dimmi.
Io vedo che sulla diretta vengono generati sottotitoli in automatico, quindi forse si sente, però io non vedo niente, cioè prima sentivo e ora no.
Non sentivi ed ora no. Molto bene.
Ok, ora sento.
Ora si sente. Adesso senti? Prova. Ok. We are sorry for this little inconvenient. Okay, we can resume the streaming.
Okay, so again, welcome to this seminar. I'm very glad to introduce you our speaker of today, Federico Venturini. My class already know him because he provided us another seminar about social ecology. But today he is here to speak about the Kurdish question. Federico is a geographer. We work together at the University of Udine, and he has a background in philosophy. And he works since several years on the Kurdish question, not only by a researcher point of view, but also and mainly as an activist. So I'm sure he will provide us insights about, concrete insights about the Kurdish situation. And we decided to propose you this seminar because the Kurdish way to organize their communities, both from economical, social, political point of view, can be seen as an alternative to the mainstream development approaches. And so I give the floor to Federico, and I thank him for his very important contribution to our course.
Hi, hello everyone. Can I move the camera? Can someone help me to move the camera? If I stay here, yeah. Yes. Okay, so thank you so much to be here. Thanks for the invitation. As mentioned, I will speak about the Kurdish question and this paradigm that has been called democratic modernity. That is very strictly linked with the discussion that we had a couple of weeks ago on social ecology. Social ecology is one of the school or tradition worldview that is behind this new idea of democratic modernity or democratic confederalism, that is a political project. Okay, so let's start as a geographer, I love maps. So in this presentation, we will have some maps, some text that we can analyze together and so on. Differently from the last time, I would prefer to have the questions all at the end. Only if there are very burning questions that point of clarification, please raise your hands. But because we're recording, maybe it's better to have the discussion just at the end altogether. Okay. So the map that you see is about something that doesn't exist. So Kurdistan is not a real land, doesn't exist. Kurdish people are the largest minority in the world without a state representation. We can estimate that Kurdish people are between 30 million and 50 million. Of course, it's hard to give a real and concrete number because they are within other nation states. So there are no clear data on that. But for sure, Kurdistan is divided in 4 nation states. We have this part that is in Syria, that is called Rojava. Then there is this part that is in Turkey, that is called Bakur. There is this part that is in Iraq that is called Bashur, and then there is this part in Iran that is called Rojilat. These are the official Kurdish name for the 4 different areas. So this is more classical map with the borders. And so we are talking about this area here, and as you can see, it's a very central in Middle East. So it's not only important from resources point of view, that the area is rich of petrol, some parts are rich of petrols, but also oil, but it's also very important from a geostrategical position, okay, in order to control all the movements in Middle East. But as you can see, some of the borders have been drawn with a ruler. Of course, a lot of parts belongs to a desert, but not only that. The division of the Middle East traces back to the First World War. And if we compare to the borders that we saw previously with the ethnic groups that are living in the Middle East, we can see that they are very different. Okay, so in this area, these areas are desert, so no people lives there. But Middle East is very mosaic of different culture, different peoples, different languages that are not fully represented by the nation states. If we see the previous map, they seem very monolithic, but if we see the situation with a different map, we can grasp that the reality is very complex from a cultural point of view, ethnic point of view, and so on. Okay. So as I mentioned, this situation and the Kurdish question was born with the end of the First World War and with the end of the Ottoman Empire. So in 1916, there was disagreement between France and UK and the British Empire, the French Empire and the British Empire, that was called Sykes-Picot by the 2 people that they signed it. So there was the first division of the Middle East, and they were thinking, okay, we will win the war, and the Ottoman Empire will lose, and we want to conquer, we want to manage that land. So we can see that they decided to have 2 spheres of influence or direct control. This part was direct control from France, this was sphere of influence, this controlled by the British Empire, sphere of influence, and then this part should have been given to the Russian Empire. And Sykes-Picot Agreement is also one of the first official documents from the colonial powers that will start to discuss about Palestine. Okay, that is also another burning question that we will not explore today. Okay, but is interrelated also to that decision at that time. Okay, but then we arrived in 1920, and the colonial power decided to change a couple of stuff, and for the sake of our presentation, the the Treaty of Sèvres is the first time and the only time where the Kurdish nation was envisioned. So in this treaty is written that this part, this area, should have been declared Kurdistan to the Kurdish people. Okay, and then of course we have Turkey, we have other parts to Greece, to French, to the British Empire, and so on. 1920. But then we arrive in 1923 with the Treaty of Lausanne, where the contemporary and modern Turkish state is established after a war that Mustafa Kemal won from the Turkish side. And so the idea of the Kurdish state is not implemented because that territory has been conquered by Turkey. And also other parts from Greece also to the French and so on, that are conquered by Turkey. So more or less, at the end of this process, these are the borders that we have still today. Okay, the borders in the Middle East didn't change till the arrival of ISIS a few years ago. Okay, ISIS was the only actor in the region that managed to change what was designed and implemented by the colonial power in the 20s of the last century. But we will see after. I want to introduce one of the key actors for today, the PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party. So the PKK is considered a terrorist organization by Turkey, US, the European Union, and few other Western countries, but for the rest of the world is considered a national liberation movement. Like something that happened also with the ANC in South Africa against the apartheid, and other national liberation movement in the 70s, in the 80s. Okay, so he developed in 1978. That was founded in Turkey, in Bakur. And at the beginning, they wanted to have the PKK as a party. Okay, but then there was a lot of instability in Turkey, and they had many military coups from the 50s to the 80s, even in the 90s. There was one military coup in 1981. The PKK started to go clandestine, and in 1984 there was the first large-scale armed attack and a general uprising against the Turkish state. Why this happened? Because in 1923, as we saw, the idea of Kurdistan, of an independent Kurdistan, was not implemented. However, the people on the ground were Kurdish. Okay, so between 1923 and, let's say, till the 70s, the 60s, there were a lot of policies to assimilation of Kurdish people. So a lot of population was shifted and was pushed in Kurdish majority areas in order to change the demographic, and Kurdish people were considered class B citizens, okay, second-class citizens. So, for example, in Syria, they were not allowed to have a passport, the language was not allowed, the development of that areas were not pushed much, so they were left very poor, people started to migrate in other parts, so very, well, complex and bad situation in general. But then in the 70s, end of the 60s and 70s, the situation started to shift. And at the global level, there was a lot of political, let's say, interest. Also, there was linked to the 1968 in US, in Europe, and so on. So there was a lot of movement, a lot of ideas, and the resurgence also of the Kurdish identity. And so the PKK started that time. There were also other Kurdish groups, but that is the PKK then managed to have the hegemony in the movement. So the Kurdish question is can be summarized. What can we do? What shall we do with the people living there? Okay, we have Kurdish people that they are not represented. What shall we do with them? Okay, that is a summary. Okay, to put it bluntly. Okay, and then the PKK started to have their solution. The solution was we want to have an independent Kurdistan that is based on socialist principle, and we will have a revolution and an armed struggle in order to have our independent Kurdistan. Okay. And this was at the beginning, so it was a very classical national liberation movement, was linked to the Soviet Union, inspired by Maoists and other experiences in South America or Africa. But then in the 90s, they started to have a shift, as we will see in a bit, that became more visible, and it was widely understood at the end of the 90s when the leader of the PKK and one of the founders, Abdullah Öcalan, was captured and is still held in almost complete isolation in a small island in Turkey that is called İmralı. Then we had many attentive ceasefires. One that was quite serious happened between 2013 and 2015, but also that collapsed. And then there was again a new large-scale conflict that is still ongoing today in 2025. Okay. So why there was this shift and why this shift happened, moving the PKK from a classical Marxist Leninist position to something new, to a new paradigm that is called democratic modernity? Well, they acknowledge two different things. On one side, they analyzed the collapse of the Soviet Union. So they said, well, it didn't work very well. And also the idea that one party would take the power and then empower the population doesn't work that way. Okay, so the Soviet Union was seen as a top-down structure that was not feasible in order to liberate the people. And also they also acknowledge the failure of the national liberation movements because they were very effective to dismantle the direct control of the colonial powers of their territories. However, that didn't translate to a real liberation of the population. And so neo-colonial dynamics continued, and also the exploitation of natural resources in former colonies continued from Western powers. And so they started to develop a critique of the state, seen as a top-down structure that is inherently perpetuating domination. And then they said, okay, what we want is not an autonomous state, but we want to have more autonomy within the existing borders. We don't want to create an autonomous Kurdistan because it will perpetuate the same problems of any state. But we want to create autonomy coming from the bottom up, and then maybe one day the state will not be longer necessary. Okay. As I mentioned, one of the leaders of this process, of translating and to create the paradigm of democratic modernity is Abdullah Öcalan, that has been compared to Nelson Mandela. There are many parallelisms, many similarities. Both are the recognized leader of their population. Both they are design terrorists, leader of a terrorist organization, ANC and the PKK. Both lived many years in a solitary confinement in a prison on an island. Okay, Öcalan is still in prison, and one of the preconditions to have a peace process, a meaningful peace process, is the liberation of Abdullah Öcalan, or at least to change his condition in prison in order to participate to the peace process. But he's not only a political leader, he's also a politician and also a philosopher. So in the following quotes, in the following slides, I have some quotes that for me are quite effective in order to illustrate and synthesize the Kurdish question. So thanks to its geographical position, the Kurds have been able to protect their existence as an ethnic community until today. So they were quite isolated, there were a lot of mountains. On the other hand, it was the exposed position of the Kurdish settlement area, which often whetted the appetite of external powers and invited them to rise and conquest. So it was central, very high peaks, but as I mentioned at the beginning, very central for the movements of goods and armies. So the Kurds only demand that their existence be respected. They demand freedom of culture and a fully democratic system. So this was the starting point at the end of the 70s and is still true today. And also Öcalan refers to South Africa, Wales, Northern Ireland, Scotland, and Corsica as other examples where people were nationed and called for the solution of different tensions within their minorities. So this is, here we can see that the proposal of the Kurdish movement. So they're working for a system of democratic self-organization in Kurdistan with the feature of a confederation. So democratic confederalism understands itself as a coordination model for a democratic nation. Okay, so democratic modernity is the worldview. Let's say like social ecology is the worldview. Democratic confederalism is the political project. Let's say we can say like libertarian municipalism or communalism is the political project of social ecology. And Murebukchin, while he was in prison, he was exposed to the idea of Murebukchin, and as you can see, there are many overlaps. Okay. And one of the most important things is that this model should be flexible, accept multiculturality, anti-monopolistic, and consensus-oriented. And also ecology and feminism are central pillars of this project. Okay. So in this slide, we can see the three main pillars. At the center, I put democracy, and then we have ecology and women's liberation. I didn't put here feminism because for the Kurdish liberation movement, feminism is a political tradition that has been co-opted by capitalism and by the contemporary reactionary forces, let's say, okay, to use their language. So they prefer women's liberation. Okay, we can agree or not, we can debate about that, but this is their decision. Okay, so what does it mean democracy? Well, they want to have the people at the center. We want the people to make decisions with the power that flows from the bottom through a grassroots or direct democracy. Okay, so the national state usually is conceived as a top-down structure. What they are proposing is a bottom-up based on popular assemblies that they confederate at different levels. And within this, there is also multicultural accommodation. So the understanding that, also referring to the previous maps with many different colors that are very interlinked, they understood, well, we need to allow the coexistence, the peaceful coexistence of different minorities, people with different faiths, Christians, Yazidi, Muslim, different kind of Muslims, atheists, and so on, and also with different cultural background. Okay. Then we have ecology. Öcalan calls for a renewed relation with nature against the exploitation of nature. That is one of the idea that is borrowing from social ecology. That is also at the base of a renewed relation, not only with nature, but also within society. And then women's liberation. Women has been considered the first colony. So the first group that was colonized, they saw the imposition on themselves. And so in democratic confederalism, in democratic modernity, there is the call to put at the forefront of the revolution the women and their needs. So if this is the political structure, let's see how is the situation in Bakur, and then I will shift then to the situation in Rojava. So this is a bit of a mix of what is happening on the ground from a political perspective, and also a bit of examples. And it's also very important to see the strict interlink between geopolitical situation and what can be done on the ground. Okay. So this is one of a map. Again, it doesn't exist. It's just a dream that is linked with the call of neo-Ottomanism. So with the idea that Turkey wants to create or recreate a new Ottoman Empire. Okay. Kemal Atatürk, that is the father of the modern Turkey, was an army man, but was also very. He called for a like state. Within this idea of neo-Ottomanism, the role of religion and of Islam comes very important again. Okay, so there is this idea that circulates along the elites in Ankara and Istanbul, and this is also seen through the military presence and the projection of military power of Turkey. This is a map from a few years ago, but still the situation didn't change much. And we can see that the Turkish army is spread in different states, in Libya, in Sudan, in Somalia, in Qatar, in Iraq, Azerbaijan, in Cyprus. Cyprus is directly controlled by, half of this island is directly controlled by Turkey, and also in the Balkans. It's worth to remember that in Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan and Armenia, they had a conflict, and Turkey heavily sided with Azerbaijan and provided a lot of support, military support in the conflict that was won by Azerbaijan. It was just a few years ago. Okay, and we can also see the same military projection directly in Africa. With in red, there are the states that they have some links, military pacts with Turkey. And again, there is the presence of in different states of the army. And here in Suakin, the Turkish army is building a naval base. Okay, so it's quite unique that in a nation state to build a military port in a foreign nation, if that doesn't want to just project their power. It's also worth to remember that Turkey is in NATO, is the second largest army in NATO after the one of US. And Turkey is also controlling part of northern Iraq. This is North Iraq, that is Syria. Here we have Iran. This part is the autonomous region the Kurdish Autonomous Region in Iraq. I'm not talking about the autonomous region in Iraq, because that is a different political project. It's still Kurdish, of course, but they are not linked with the Kurdish freedom movement and with the paradigm of democratic modernity. So from a political standpoint, they are very linked with capitalism and political line with Turkey and US. Very complex, many different factions within the Kurdish society, but this is the situation on the ground. In this part, we have basis of the PKK, and we have the direct control with military posts by the Turkish army in these spots, okay, in order to control the territory against the possible infiltration of PKK in Turkey. Okay, after many maps and a lot of tests, I just want to show you some pictures of the time that I passed, that I was there, just to show you a bit what looks like. That is very classic. So a lot of plain, not many forests, and then we have mountains, quite high peaks, 3,000 meters, 4,000 meters, and so on. Mount Ararat is in that area as well. So yeah, just to give a glimpse what is look like. Now, where I was there, this is the meal that we shared together. Very cold during the winter, very hot during the summer. Mediterranean diet. Kurdish is an Indo-European language, so it's more similar to European languages, like let's say like Italian, than Arabic, okay, from a linguistic point of view. And this is a celebration of Newroz. Newroz is like the new year for the Kurdish population. And that is happening, is a period of the year, the second half of March. Okay, there are a few years of Newroz. These are the celebration in Ahmed, or Diyarbakir. Ahmed is the Kurdish name. Diyarbakir is the Turkish name. That is also considered the most important, the biggest city in Kurdistan. It is somehow the possible capital, okay, of an independent Kurdistan. So as you can see, many people, thousands of people coming together, celebrating, and a lot of flags that also symbolize many different groups that are struggling to get different perspectives, but within the project of democratic federalism. And again, here is the symbol of Newroz, that is the fire, symbol of the renovation and also freedom against oppression. And here, a lot of, well, Abdullah Öcalan face, big face, and then the color, national colors are green, nature, then we have red, socialism, and also the blood of the martyrs for the revolution, and then yellow is the link with the soil, with the ground, something very classic. I want to show that in Turkey the situation is very the repression against the Kurds continues. There are arrests of politicians or journalists that are happening every day, and prisons are very full of Kurdish. In 2016 and 17, there was a peak of the internal conflict, and the Kurdish minority lives in this part. I mentioned Bakur, where they have the majority, that it's enough, and they decided to declare autonomy. So they didn't declare independence, but they declare in this neighborhood, in this city, Turkish state official will not enter. This is a free liberated area. This was a call by many neighborhoods, by many cities in this part. Of course, the Turkish state didn't take it very well, and they sent the army. And they started to bombard their own cities, and they were bulldozed to the ground, as we will see in a bit. So 100,000 people were displaced, many were killed, and it's still a wound that is open in the society. So this is the aerial photo of the old town in the old district in Abed, in Diyarbakir. Is also part. There is also an UNESCO site in this district, thousands of years old. And then this one is the aerial photo of the same neighborhood months after the clashes. They were totally bulldozed. What is happening now here? So in this area was confiscated by the state, and they are building new houses that will be sold on the market to Turkish citizens. So all the people that were living here, they were evicted, they were pushed away, and they are not building again the old district, but they are building new houses. Okay, completely not carrying any attention to the UNESCO site or the previous urban fabric. This is from a different neighborhood. These are one of the photos that I took. We are in Cizre, not very far. And as you can see, there were very heavy clashes in the town, in the neighborhood. But very few people know about what happened. So there was a NATO country, a NATO army that was bombarding with artillery and heavy guns their own people. They didn't go for the political solution of the issue, a recognition of the Kurdish identity. And the control of the Kurdish minority is not happening only through a very visible violence, as the one that I show you, or through prisons or repression, but it's also through water. So this is the city, well, the town of Hasankeyf is a town that with a very old foundation. It traces back to 3,000, 4,000 years before Christ. So it was, let's say, very important from an historical point of view. And this used to be a Roman bridge. And when I was there in 2016, they were refurbishing it. Okay, so they were, well, renovating it, let's say. And I said, oh, well, that is a nice project. So they were all ruins. You are trying to consolidate in order not to be destroyed and so on. So it's not too bad. Well, the people is not so good because soon all the area will be flooded because the Turkish state decided to build a dam in that area, and all Hasankeyf will be flooded and covered by water. So they were doing their works only in order to allow scuba divers to go there and to have tourists under the water of the bridge that will be flooded and covered. The project of the dam was so crazy that even the IMF decided not to fund this project. So it was very hard for the Turkish state because they couldn't find anyone that was able to fund their project, and so they had to go themselves alone. So this is a project that is a mega project that was funded and accomplished only by the Turkish state. And it was not only for electricity generation, but also to control the territory, because they can, with the lake that was generated, that broke the movement, the free movement of the guerrilla or the Kurdish people, and also they managed to use and to control the water that was going to the neighborhood countries with other Kurdish minorities. So that water is going to Syria or is going to Iraq, and then with the dam, Turkey is able to control the water and access to water. Okay. I don't know if you explore this water as a gun. Yeah. Okay. So we spoke about the situation in Bakur, and then we can speak about a bit about the situation in Syria, in Rojava. So just to give a bit of a background, ISIS, the one that I mentioned at the beginning, at its peak, managed to conquer all this territory between Syria and Iraq. ISIS had two different capitals, one in Iraq that was Mosul, and the other one that was in Raqqa in Syria. So ISIS was a very strict Islamist fanatist group, and then thanks to the presence of the Kurdish forces, of Assad forces, and also Iraq army, that this area shrinked, and now is somehow, let's say, that has been, ISIS doesn't have anymore a representation, a territory representation like at that time. So it was like a state. They managed even to create their coins, they have their judiciary system, and so on. So as I mentioned at the beginning, it was the only time where the borders of the Middle East were changed after what happened in the 20s, after the colonial powers decided to split Middle East. Okay. I mentioned that the Kurdish people fought against ISIS. Maybe some of you remember the heroic resistance of Kobane. That is, let's go back. Kobane is a small city here on the border with Turkey. Everything was black, was conquered around. The city was left only with few blocks under the control of the Kurdish fighters. But then, under the pressure of the international community, and also thanks to the heroic resistance of the Kurds, they managed to expand, let's say, or not to fall, and to continue the revolution, and to destroy at the end ISIS. That was especially thanks to the direct involvement of US, not with troops on the ground, but through aerial bombardments. Okay. And it's also quite funny because Kobane was on the border with Turkey, but Turkey didn't allow people to go inside Kobane. Turkey allowed people to flee from Kobane, but didn't allow fighters or even Turkish army to go and fight against ISIS, because Turkey is quite clear, and it's been documented, that Turkey supported ISIS even with the direct support, giving not only eyes through hospitals to the ISIS militants, but also with guns through ISIS to ISIS. Why this? Because were Islamist, and also because ISIS was used against the Kurds. So all the what was happening in Syria from 2011 was a lot of instability that started with the Arab Spring. So there were different fractions and different parties and groups that were fighting against the Assad regime, calling for freedom. And in the border with Turkey, where the Kurdish minority was the majority, they started to have they started to implement forms of democratic confederalism. So they started to have more autonomy, and the area were liberated from the Assad regime. So Turkey was quite happy to have ISIS fighting against Kurds, because Turkey didn't want to have an example on the border that could inspire the Kurdish minority in Turkey. So this is quite funny image, but it's definitely true. Okay. So, for example, in that time, Turkey didn't do anything, but there was a lot of pressure to Turkey to do something, and they said at a certain point, okay, we will start to fight against terrorists. So they consider ISIS and the Kurds terrorists, and so they started to bombard the Kurds. Okay, it was quite ironic. Also in Syria, the situation is very complex from an active point of view. Okay, Alawite on the coast, that is the minority where the Assad regime is coming from. Then we have Kurds here, and in this part we have Sunni Arabs in other parts, and then you have the Druze here in the border close to the Jordan and Israel. Okay, the Druze minority is also quite interesting. They have the support of Israel, because there is also a very big minority of Druze in Israel, and also they are used against the Assad regime. Okay, Israel in the last year expanded the Golan Heights occupation in order to support the Druze, but also for geopolitical reasons. But I will go back in a bit. So this was the situation till November 2024. So ISIS was defeated, and then we had in red the Assad regime that was supported by Iran and Russia. We have the Kurdish forces, but they were called even now Syrian Democratic Forces, because the territory is not only Kurd, but there are also many other minorities. So they decided to change its name. It's not just the Kurdish army, let's say, but the Syrian Democratic Forces. Okay? And then we have these 3 bits, 1, 2, and 3, that are areas that are controlled and invaded through time by Turkey. So I don't think that many of you know, but Turkey, that is a nation, is a NATO country, is a state that is debating to enter or not in the European Union, is controlling, occupying part of Iraq, as I mentioned before, and Syria as well. These parts, especially Afrin, were inhabited for centuries by Kurdish people. And a few years ago, they were totally, the territory was conquered and people displaced or killed, and now it's directly managed by Turkey. Here, there is a US military base, a different story in the middle of the desert, okay? And then we have Idlib. Idlib is very important because I showed you before that ISIS was very big. The territory of ISIS was very big. And they were not defeated overnight. So the campaign against ISIS lasted for 2-3 years. So, and while they were losing ground, they were not just killed on the spot, all of them, also with the family, but they were pushed away. They were giving a safe conduct to Idlib. Idlib in 2011 was a stronghold of the Arab Spring, and since the beginning of the Arab Spring, they managed to self-manage against the Assad regime. But that changed through time because all the jihadist militants and their family, even if they were not Syrian, coming from Europe, from other nations in the Middle East, or from the rest of the world, they were pushed to Idlib. That changed the demographic, of course. Okay. Okay. And so what happened in November 2024, there was a surprise attack from Idlib by the army that was composed by former members of Al-Qaeda, of ISIS, and Islamist militants, and they managed in few weeks with a very quick and unexpected operation to top the Assad regime. And now they are in charge of Syria. So now they are controlling all the red part, and they want to, there are discussions also how to, how to englobate, how to relate with this part that is called the Democratic Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria. That is what I will talk about. So this is the project that is linked with democratic confederalism. It started with the Kurdish minority, but then now it encompasses many other minorities. And it's also very important that this entity is not called themselves Java, but is called Autonomous Administration of North of East Syria. So this is the first sign that this project is not calling for the creation of a new entity, but of a new state entity, but is a call for the creation of an entity that is based on autonomy, not only for the Kurds, but for all the minorities on the ground. So the multicultural aspect is very present even in the name. In the next few slides, I want you to, well, we will do that together to explore a very important document that is the social contract that has been developed in this area from 2011. There were different versions. The last version of this social contract is from 2023. I'm giving you the link. So this is the official document. I'll give you the link at the end of the presentation if you want to check. Okay. And there is a very nice part that this is the preamble, the introduction, that I really feel passionate when I read that, because I think that is very inspiring. Let's not forget that this document has been written during a civil war by people fighting, especially by Kurds that were oppressed by more than a century. And when they had the power and they had the mean of violence, they decided to develop a project that is not only for them, but even for the people that were oppressing them. Okay, so the opening of this social contract sounds like this: we, the daughters and sons of North and East Syria, Kurds, Arabs, Syriac Assyrians, Turkmen, Armenian, Circassian, Chechens, Muslim, Christians, and Yazidis, in our awareness and belief of the duty upon us from the martyrs, in response to the demands of our people to live in dignity, and in response to the great sacrifice made by the Syrians, came together to establish a democratic system in North and East Syria to form a basis for building a future Syria without racist tendencies, discrimination, exclusion, or the marginalization of any identity. So this is the opening of this document. That is, in my opinion, groundbreaking. In Middle East, a region that is where we have a lot of autocracy, or many call strong democracy, or democracy with a strong person in charge, and so on, we see this with this call of multiculturalism and respect of the others and so on. But of course, it doesn't stop here. Okay, too much text and we cannot read. Is there any chance to move? Is there any chance to move the... Yeah, my fault. I should have done that before. But... Well, okay, that is fine. You will have... Okay, it's fine. It's fine. Again, is underlined the Democratic Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria is integral part of Syria. So they are not independentists. This is very clear. But then you can read here and there, they want a democratic system, autonomy, justice, equality, freedom from a cultural, religious, and ideological perspective, diversity and tolerance, and so on. So they're a very important concept. And then we have all the different articles in this social contract. Okay, I just picked some of them. We don't have the time, unfortunately, to read all of them. But if you're interested in this, I found it very inspiring. I really strongly suggest to go and read by yourself. Okay, but again, it's also worth noting decisions that direct affect communities are taken according to the principle of consensus. So consensus decision-making process, not just majority, like in our European Western democracy, but they are working in a very effective way, very advanced through consensus. That is written in the social contract, that in the Constitution is very groundbreaking. And then again, also the link with nature, adopting environmental and societal democratic life as a basis, and working to build an environmentally democratic society, and preventing unjust dealing with plundering and destruction of nature. So that is another pillar of democratic confederalism, that is the relation with nature. Okay. And then from an economic point of view, they want to apply the principle of a communal economy linked to self-sufficiency and sustainable and balanced development. And then the call for women is eliminating the exploitation of women, and so on. Natural wealth and resources belong to society, and so on. So this is the link. This website, the Rojava Information Center, is very useful if you want to not only update information about what's happening there in the ground, but also with documents that are written in English. Okay. It works as an official hub of information for the autonomous region. So from a political point of view, how is managed? So we have assemblies that start from the base and then that confederates higher up. So we have a commune that can be a small village or a city or a street in a city. And then we have neighborhood, then villages, people's council at the higher level. And then more neighborhood, more villages, and on, they will form a district people's council. And then they will reach an assembly for all the region. Okay, that is something very similar to the project of libertarian municipalism or communalism, and is also very similar to what the Zapatistas are doing in Chiapas. Okay, and they have assemblies not only on a geographical base, but also from a thematic base. So they have commission for defense, economics, free society, and so on. Okay, and at all different bases, at all different levels, there is a representative or a president, and they should be two all the time. So a woman and a male. In that way, they ensure a gender balance, and also they ensure that it's not just one person that is in charge, but at least two. Okay, so in order to distribute power that cannot be destroyed. And also at all the different levels, they have women assemblies that they have the power to put the veto on any decision that will impact themselves. Okay, so that the women have the power to decide whatever they want regarding, for example, their body. That seems quite fair and natural, but even in Western democracy, it's not so obvious. Okay, let's think, for example, to abortion law. From this perspective, they are very advanced also, for example, in the construction of GeoNovember. GeoNovember is a small village they developed that was constructed only by women and is managed only by women. Men can enter, but they have to leave for the night. This is an experiment, is a way to empower women to self-manage and also to, let's say, to recuperate, to heal from damage that they will receive in the society, in the wider society. So it's a great example. You can find a lot of literature, the GeoNovember village. I just want to conclude with two more topics. One is the economy in Rojava, because many of the questions that I received were around economics. And then another topic, if I have time, on the role of activist researcher like myself. What can I do? Okay, so the following information are coming from this amazing book, The Anti-Capitalist Economy in Rojava, written a few years ago by Dize Aslan, that is a Kurdish activist. So, which are the principles at the base of the economy? Well, of course, they want to develop an economy that is democratic, anti-capitalist. And this new model of economy is also linked to the political project. What they want is to establish a collective ownership where the use value is more important of profit and where all the different processes are self-managed. And then, of course, this is an opposition to capitalism. And is based also on the willingness and the decision of the communes, so of the people coming together in the assemblies that are not just deciding how to manage something, but they are also deciding also how to manage their economy. Okay, and even here there is the importance of the co-presidencies of women and men together. Okay, I will just read the core principle: communal economy, decentralized decision-making process, and then ecological orientation. These are the principles. In practice, we have many agricultural cooperatives. And then many cooperatives that are not just, of course, agricultural cooperatives, but also linked to textile, food production, small manufacturing cooperatives. Many of these examples are led by women. Okay, and within this project, of course, there is not just the economic aspect, but also they are seen as a political education and social empowerment project. Okay. As you can see also, the neighborhood communes coordinate the distribution, and there is the role of the committees to regulate the prices and so on. I want to stress that this project is at the very early stage. This is the theory. They are trying to implement some example here and there. But of course, at the moment, the majority of the economic transactions happen in a capitalist way, okay? But they are trying to implement that. They don't have only the theory. They don't have only the social contract. They have examples that are trying to mobilize the ideas. So we'll just jump, and this is some material that I will leave to you. There are some tensions, of course, between the Syrian central government and the project of the autonomous region, and they need to adjust and try to converge to some common points. For example, cultural identity, to language rights, the freedom of religion, as also the status of women. Their perspective is very different. Let's speak about, for example, freedom of religion. In the Syrian proposed new constitution, it's written that the president must be Muslim and that Islamic law is the principal source of legislation. If we check the social contract, well, it establishes no official religion and imposes no religious test of any public office. How can we merge these two opposition interpretation, or these two different positions? And also the status of women. Well, we have the Article 21 of the Constitutional Declaration, so in Syria, that reference to women, but there are no references to equality. So it says that only that Syria will preserve the social status of women and will defend women and the family, okay? But I think that is not really enough, and it's totally different from what is written in the social contract, where equality of women is enshrined, okay? And then also cultural identity and language rights are very different. So I just want to conclude very briefly as the possibility and challenges as an activist researcher. I came to work with the Kurdish movement very by chance through the links of social ecology and democratic confederalism. So I was exposed first to social ecology, and then the Kurdish movement. I said, oh, well, you are saying interesting stuff. Can we start to collaborate together? And I managed to be part of some peace delegation. And so I managed to see some of the destructions and some of the examples on the ground. This again is Cizre. So this was my role, to document and also to push and try to visit a political prisoner, Selahattin Demirtas. She's one of the top leaders in Turkey that is in prison since 2016 or 17, still there, even if even at the European court level has been established that is wrongly accused and wrongly detained. This is the prison of Edirne. So I've been part of this delegation that was trying to push the Turkish state to make concessions. And then also I was part of delegation at the Council of Europe in Strasbourg, and also to delegation at the Council of the Parliament in UK, and also the European Parliament in Brussels. So I try to do some diplomatic work, not just to document for the sake of documentation, but also to push some change in policy in the political discourse. This not only at the high level, this we are at the House of Commons in London, but also at the more society level. I'm part of a group that is Udine per Nudem. Nudem Durak is a political prison, is a singer that has been in prison for many years in Turkey, only for singing in Kurdish. So I have been involved in this solidarity campaign, and I also try to organize speeches where I speak about what is happening in Kurdistan. And then, of course, I also write, as all academics we do. We write. We have this book, Your Freedom and Mine, that's been translated, that is in English, that has been translated in Italian, in Arabic, and is also in Portuguese. You can find them online. If you want to have a copy, please ask me. That is for free, the PDF. At the same time, just to conclude, this is coming also to a cost. This is a comrade and a colleague of mine. We spoke at the same conference, Network for an Alternative Quest, in 2015, that was organized by the Kurdish Freedom Movement. We spoke together, like I spoke about social ecology, he spoke about Foucault and the Kurdish movement. Only a few years later, I recognized that he went to the mountains to fight with the guerrillas, and he was killed. Okay, so this is very interesting, the possibilities and the different paths that can be followed. Another possibility here at the entrance of Nevroz, we had this amazing policeman. They were there supposedly to protect the Kurdish people, but in fact they were there to check that the Kurdish would not rebel against the Turkish state, against the police, and they didn't check the bags, for example, for explosives and so on, because a few years before, in 2015, there were some massacres by ISIS through bombs in youth gatherings. Okay, so the police was there to control and to repress. That policeman was not very happy about my photo, and he grabbed my camera. I had to delete the photo, but then I managed to recover it. And at the same time, when we were in Cizre, at the end of the road, there was a building that was collapsed with many deaths within this building, and that was destroyed by the artillery, by the Turkish state. So Cizre is very close to the border with Iraq. So during the first Gulf War in 1991-92, they built shelters under the buildings because they were afraid of possible attacks from Saddam. So in Cizre, they had this building and the shelter were underground. So during the clashes between the Turkish state and the freedom fighters, the population went underground in the shelters, and they were public. And the Turkish state started to bombard the buildings till they collapsed with the people within. So I was there, and I didn't recognize that that was the spot because everything was destroyed. But then arrived a tank from the Turkish state, arrived some personnel without any insignia, and they detained us there for half an hour till some lawyers managed to pick us and to free us. So there are some possible costs and to do this kind of reflection, this kind of research, we have to safeguard your personal safety and also the safety of the people on the ground, and not to expose themselves, and to speak also, try to respect their voices and not to distort their ideas and so on. So as an activist researcher, I think that there are many possibilities, but also a lot of challenges when you try to work in this kind of context. Yeah, thank you. $20 minutes.
Okay, I think that we have time for question or reflection. I don't know if it's possible to have question maybe also from the public.
Yeah, we have one question from you.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe you can answer very briefly to that question, and then we.
Yeah. So we will have time also when the screen will end. So
Yes, for this part, we pass the microphone.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
The question.
Yeah, the question is about the Yazidis. If they are, who are the Yazidis, and if where do they live?
That's it. You can see here. Okay. So this is an interesting question. I want to go back. Okay. So the Yazidi, they live here. Okay. Close to the Sinjar mountains. So the Yazidi are a very small minority. They are a very tight-knit group with very specific and unique culture and religion as well, that are linked also to Zoroastrianism. And through their history, they were massacred multiple times. So when ISIS was expanding, the Yazidi were very fearful of their possible outcome of the expansion of ISIS. When ISIS arrived here, the Iraqi troops fled, and also the Peshmerga, the Kurdish from the Kurdish autonomous region, they were not very supportive. So the troops from the PKK, from the Kandil Mountains, arrived, and together with the other Kurdish forces, with the other Peshmerga, they managed to help the withdrawal of the people from Sinjar and so they managed to save some of the Yazidi. There was a massacre, but was not a complete annihilation of the population. So through time, the Yazidi were exposed to the ideas of democratic confederalism and started to fight alongside the Kurdish forces. So they managed to push out ISIS, and they started to implement democratic confederalism even in their territory. So now in Sinjar, we have Yazidi people that are trying to implement democratic confederalism. Not all of them, but a part, yes. So it's a quite unique experience that is located in this area in Iraq, very close to the border with Rojava here. Yeah. That at the moment is under the control, formal control of the Iraqi central government.
from the online public. Okay. So you sent already a lot of questions to Federico, but I think that something more is possible to ask.
So, hello, thank you so much. It was super interesting for me. And I wanted to ask if in the social contract there is something about like breaches of the social contract. For example, if there is like a crime, what happens with the person or something like that? Thank you.
Thank you.
So I don't remember by heart the social contract, even if I'm a big fan. So I don't remember. However, I know that there are some examples of reparative justice. And so, yeah, there is definitely a shift. I don't remember if it's enshrined in the social contract, but there are definitely examples where even women groups, they try to implement reparative justice to men. So that is very inspiring, I think. But yeah, I don't have a full answer on the tip of my tongue. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I think for me, like a very like new topic, like everything like new. So what would be like the like right now, from what I understood, like the main challenges that the Kurdish people are facing, like it's like the liberation of like political prisoners and like rec- the ceasefire, for example, of Turkey, like in some areas. But what would, or what, like in your opinion, would be like a major force that would in some way push Turkey to like I don't know, like refrain or ceasefire from those areas, or like yeah, like what are their next political steps in some way?
Okay. So if I understood correctly, is what shall be done? What shall be done? So this is a clear question that is tainting the left for many years. So the situation of the court is very complex because as I tried to show in this presentation, there are many different actors. Russia troops, Iran, Israel, US interest, oil, Turkey, the European Union, the migrants that Turkey is blocking that are coming also from Syria, thanks to the money that Europe is giving to Erdogan, that is blackmailing the European Union with the threat of more refugees and so on. So it's definitely very complex, and the Kurds managed to achieve a lot, especially in Syria. And so, for example, now they decided, and this is one of the other topics that I want, maybe if we can have a bit of time later, they had to compromise somehow, or they have to implement realpolitik. And then, for example, it's not only the liberation of the political prisoners, but also they have to defend what they achieve on the ground on a possible aggression of Turkey. So Turkey stated many times that we will invade the Democratic Autonomous Region. We will invade Rojava. And we have to be sincere that the Democratic Autonomous Region will not stand a chance against a NATO country. Okay? They will put a fight, a resistance, great, but it's not possible. Okay. So, for example, the Kurdish freedom movement, they're pushing a lot on diplomatic efforts, and they decided also there was a call from Öcalan to the disbandment of the PKK that was accepted in May 2025. So the PKK decided to say, okay, we accomplished our goals, the situation dramatically changed, we want to start a peace process in order to achieve our demands, especially in Turkey. But then this is also very important for Rojava, because Turkey cannot say anymore all the Kurds are terrorists. The Democratic Region is a terrorist organization. They cannot say that anymore because the PKK said, that's it. We finish. We want to have a peaceful resolution of the conflict. So what is happening with the PKK, that is a terrorist organization, what is happening in Rojava is very deeply interconnected. Us in Western countries, in other countries, what can we do? Well, for example, we can be in solidarity with the prisoners. We can support. There are many campaigns for example, there are Mezzaluna Rossa del Kurdistan. There are some campaigns for search for fundings, or you can go to demonstrations or write or speak about what is happening there, write petitions, so maintaining the light open on what is happening there. And also, as the Zapatistas are saying, you can start to do the revolution in your place. That is something that is also coming from them. In Europe, there is a huge Kurdish diaspora. And if you're interested, you can also work with them. There is a huge Kurdish diaspora that are coming from different families. So maybe someone is linked with the Kurdish freedom movement, someone is linked with the Barzani family, someone is not interested at all in politics. But in all major cities, there is something. In Italy, there are huge communities in Turin, Milan, and Roma as well. They have even a social center that is managed by Kurdish people. That is Ararat Social Center. Yeah.
Thanks. But I think around 15, 20 years ago, maybe now, you are.
I'm not sure. I was talking about the communities that are active from this perspective. Yeah.
We did a lot of, we did a lot of activities together, but maybe now they are moved because Venice is a quite a difficult context for activism. Okay.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is around the statelessness of the Kurdish people outside, like the diaspora. What are some key programs or projects done around the world to help integrate the refugees into the different economic systems without the hope of them going back to Kurdistan one day?
I didn't understand. So are you talking about official, like UN programs and so on?
UN and maybe other programs, I'm not sure, but something that helps them with their identification as people with states.
So there are no official programs. They are not officially recognized. And if we think that the Palestinians they're facing a lot of troubles, is a nightmare for them abroad. Let's think that for the Kurdish people is even worse, a certain aspect, because they are not recognized at all. Even from a formal point of view, their situation is worse than the Palestinians. However, they didn't face, they face Nakba in a totally different scale. During the 90s, many villages were completely emptied by the Turkish state, because the villages were supporting the guerrillas in the mountains. And so many areas are a no-go area. They cannot enter. The villages were totally depopulated and no one can go there. So there is a martial law and they cannot enter there, and also in Iraq as well. But that is on a totally different level compared to the Palestinians, okay? So a few hundreds people that were displaced in this way. I think that, however, this is not a huge problem because the number are not so much impressive, and also because the refugees are working very well together. So they have a very strong community, a sense community, especially if you go in other countries in Europe, north part of Europe, especially in Germany, even in France, in UK, in the major cities, the Kurdish diaspora always organize a social center, around the social center, where they can meet, they can celebrate. Usually there are a lot of photos of the martyrs, but they can take the tea together. That is a very strong tradition to take the tea together. So so far the diaspora organized themselves, self-organized themselves, not only from democratic modernity paradigm, but also the other families. They still maintain a strong identity through these social centers and discussion within the family, and so on. I hope that I answer.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was super interesting. My question is, do you think that at some point of the history, the Kurds will be able to get the claimed territories and maybe gain independence, or it will cause just another wave of intensity in the Middle East and the maximum they can gain is autonomy?
So what I hope is that they will not achieve independence. So, and it's also their political project. They don't want independence. So they want just to have autonomy. So if you're asking, will they achieve autonomy and which kind of development will be able to have in their territory, will be very linked to a post-growth development, or will be very linked to an economy that is different from capitalism, or will they achieve just a recognition of the language, for example, cultural differences? Well, this is an open question. I'm a very positive person, but also looking at what they're achieving on the ground, I'm quite positive, especially in Rojava, so in the north and east of Syria. They achieve a lot. They have autonomy now. They are implementing that. They have their social contract. They have their structure. They have their army. They will not disband the army only because the new regime in the Syrian integrate with us. They will say, no, we know what it will end if we don't keep the guns. For now, as a self-defense. Okay, so I think that they are very smart people. They are forged by decades of war and decades of political organization. So I think that they are very effective, and I'm quite positive that they will continue to maintain and maybe to flourish. Let's see what they can achieve, for example, in Bakur, so in Turkey, in the northeast. That is another story. But also there are some symptoms that maybe with the peace process, it will start, if it will start again, maybe with a potential amnesty from the Turkish state, that will lead maybe to a real change in the Turkish society, and maybe a establishment of different kind of level of autonomy also in that area. Yes. If I can add only on this, because now I can. For example, the Kurdish regional government in Iraq, they held a referendum in 2017. They decided, well, we want to vote and we want to be independent. And then, of course, the 97% of the population, they voted for the independence. No one supported this claim. No one. The referendum was fair, but neither the Iraqi central government, nor the US, nor Turkey, nor even the European Union supported the referendum. Of course, if they approve that referendum, they will approve also the referendum in Northern Ireland or in Catalonia. Okay, so they don't want that. So what happened? No one approved, and then Iraqi forces, backed also by Iran, invaded part of the land that was freed from ISIS. And so at the end, the Kurdish regional government, at the end, they didn't have independence, and they lost even territory. So this, again, is a proof that maybe going for independence is not only risky, but also wrong from a philosophical and political standpoint of view.
I have a question. Can you explain, do you know how the social contract has been wrote and developed? Who wrote it? Who decided about, because it's wonderful. It's a wonderful constitution, very interesting, but who has wrote it?
Okay, so nice question. So as I mentioned, this is not the first version of the social contract, but this is, I think, the third. And when they drafted, it was mainly only Kurdish. It was taught only for Kurdish areas. And then through time, and the SDF were created and liberated more ground and so on, they have to think, oh, well, it's not only for us, but it's also for other minorities. So it was drafted and drafted more times. I'm not aware of the exact process. However, I know that it was drafted for sure from the Kurdish freedom movement, and so on from the cadre that were formed with these ideas in mind. However, the draft were heavily discussed with all the communities, and the publication of the social contract was postponed by many months. I think more than a year of this draft, the final draft, because there were discussions all around the different places. So I don't know the details, but a consultation on the ground with the people and with the different clan and families and different faiths, yeah, of course, yeah, and the spokesperson of different groups and minority happened. Yeah, of course, the women, that for me was obvious, because I mean, in this case was obvious, because in the Kurdish freedom movement, the women, they have the structures, so they were definitely since the beginning of the drafting. Actually, they had the other way around problem. How can the social contract be accepted by someone that is not used to women equality? Or how can social contract be accepted by a very conservative and religious society? So this was the problem to make this acceptable for others. So maybe compared to other situations, is the other way around problem. Yeah. Well.
Question. We have one last question from the class, and then one last question from the audience, and then.
Okay, maybe we can have the last question from the audience, and then we go back. Can you?
So, from the live streaming, someone asks, in your opinion, how does democratic modernity reshape approaches to the Kurdish question? So the question is, how does democratic modernity reshape approaches to the Kurdish question?
Okay, maybe. Okay, I think that is something very similar to what that I've just said to the other student. The Kurdish question usually was intended: how can we carve an independent nation state within the Middle East? With the democratic modernity is somehow breaking this idea. So the answer is to the Kurdish question is we need to create autonomy from the bottom up. So this is a new answer to this question that is old, more than a century. How can we give more autonomy on the ground? So it creates something, a new perspective. And it's not just about we want to create new borders. We want to, so Turkey will need to leave, or Syria needs to give more space to the Kurds, or the Iraq, and so on. No, the borders will stay like that, but then something that will change from the ground inside the existing societies. So it's totally reshaping the answer, but also the question itself, in my opinion.
Was the
Thank you for the presentation. My question is related to the role of education in well, within the democratic autonomous administration, in order to empower and also to making the different minorities more aware about the principles of the social contract and the way in which, sorry, they can manage then bring on the principle and the main ideas. Thank you.
So, as you can imagine, education is crucial. We already discussed about the role of education in social ecology, but sorry, no. It makes sense. I just for the others maybe to make some connections, also for social ecology in the big sphere of the project to change society. The role of education is very important. It's not just about the formal education like the school system, the university system, but also a life learning process within the society, with the wider society. So is very important. The education in the autonomous region differs from the previous one. For example, because the Kurdish language is allowed. That is a big change from before, okay? You can think that in the past, or this is also what is happening in Turkey, a Kurdish kid that is speaking only Kurd in the family will arrive at the school, let's say in primary school, and will not understand anything because all the other kids maybe they're speaking in Turkish, okay? And maybe he has some friends, they will speak a bit in Kurdish, but they are not allowed to speak in Kurdish. So in this way, the nation state impose not only the language, but impose also the idea that they are a B citizen class. Okay, so this is not happening in Rojava. Okay, so the importance of the language is very important, and they are bilingual, and also this is also very important in Article 7 of the social contract that recognize Kurdish, Arabic, and Aramaic as official languages, but then in the Article 6 states that all languages in the geography of North and East Syria are equal in all areas of social, educational, and cultural life. Okay, every people or cultural group has the right to organize its life and conduct its affairs in its mother tongue. So again, this is something very, very important. And also, they starting not to have not too much Muslim influence education, like, for example, what is happening now in the rest of Syria, that is more linked in a religious, with a religious way. But it's much more like, this is also bringing some tensions with some minority that they're not so liberal, for example. And then the role of the education is also important, for example, with reparative justice, also for the idea of the communes, so the democratic process that is coming from the base, from the grassroots, because people are not used to at all. I mean, what is this? I don't care. I just want to go to my house and that's it. I don't want to stay in a room for 3 or 4 hours talking about something I don't care. So it's an educational process, and also the educational process is for the role of women. That is important to have the education both for the women to empower them, but also for the men and for the rest of society to understand the limits and the quality and so on. So yeah, the education is crucial. Yeah.
Okay. I think we have to conclude. I want really to thank Federico for this very inspiring seminar. I hope it's quite challenging to synthesize all his knowledge and passion about Kurdistan in 1.5 hours. So thank you very much. I think that you have had an example or some example of alternatives. As usual, they are not something that we can, that are already accomplished. They are process, they are proposal, they are inspiration, suggestion that we can adapt and adopt also in our context, in our daily life, or in our activism, study, research, and so on. So thank you, Federico, and thank you also to the people who follow us online.